Most people believe something simple about rights. They apply equally. That if you're legally allowed to work, to rent a home, to see a doctor, and to exist in public, those rules apply the same to everyone. But for trans people, many of those ordinary rights become conditional. Not because we're asking for special treatment, but because protections stop applying consistently once gender identity gets involved. This video isn't about ideology. It's about where everyday rights quietly break down. People tend to assume that civil rights don't disappear when they cross a state line. But for trans people, protections depend on geography. There is no single comprehensive federal law that explicitly guarantees non-discrimination protections for gender identity in every area of life. Instead, protections vary by state, by city, by school district, and by employer. That means someone can be protected at home and lose those protections the moment they travel, relocate, or change jobs. Having to check your zip code to know whether discrimination is legal isn't equality. Federal interpretations exist, but enforcement is uneven. State laws override or restrict protections. Many gaps remain in housing, healthcare, and public accommodations. People expect medical decisions to stay between patients and doctors. That assumption breaks when the patient is trans. In many states, doctors can legally refuse gender affirming care. Insurance plans can just exclude it. Legislators can override the medical consensus. This is not due to unique care. It's the same principle applied unevenly. For most people, politicians don't decide which treatments are allowed. For trans people, they often do. Major medical organizations support gender-affirming care. Care bans contradict established standards. Medical decisions are politicized only for certain patients. Another assumption people make is they can't be fired simply for who they are. But employment protections for trans people are uneven, difficult to enforce, and often reactive instead of preventative. Even where protections technically exist, retaliation is hard to prove. Hostile work environments persist. Job loss is often framed as unrelated. A right that only exists on paper is not the same as protection in practice. Burden of proof falls on the employee. Legal remedies are slow and expensive. Fear of retaliation discourages reporting. People tend to believe housing discrimination is clearly illegal. That clarity disappears for trans people. Trans individuals can still be denied rentals, evicted, and even turned away from shelters. Sometimes explicitly, sometimes quietly, sometimes legally. Housing instability doesn't exist in isolation. It affects employment, healthcare, and personal safety. When housing isn't secure, nothing else is either. Most people move through public spaces without scrutiny. bathrooms, gyms, schools, government buildings, and other public spaces. But for trans people, access to public life is often conditional. The rules change, the enforcement varies, and ordinary activities can become confrontations. This isn't about comfort, it's about freedom of movement. For the majority of people, their legal documents reflect who they are. For trans people, that's often not even allowed. In many states, gender marker changes are restricted or banned. IDs conflict with lived identity. Routine interactions become riskier. Paperwork controls real life. Employment, travel, housing, and safety. When documents don't match reality, the system works against the person carrying them. People also assume violence against them will be taken seriously. For trans people, protection is inconsistent. Hate crimes are underreported, misclassified, sometimes just outright dismissed. Law enforcement responses vary widely. Legal recognition isn't guaranteed. Protection after harm should not depend on identity, but too often it does. None of this is about special rights. It's about how ordinary rights quietly stop applying when the person involved is trans. When protections depend on location, paperwork, or politics, they're no longer rights, they're permissions. And equal rights don't work if they only apply some of the time.